What's up, y'all, and welcome to the season 3 finale of Your Hair Made Simple, the podcast. I'm your host, Shannon, and today for our finale, we are spending some time talking about you and your hair with 7 key traits that you need to know and understand about your natural hair to master your hair journey. And we are approaching spring 2025. It is upon us, and spring is the perfect time to dive into refreshing, resetting, renewing your hair journey, or starting for the very first time, depending on where you are. So I'm going to equip you with 7 key traits that you need to know and understand. So that way it can inform how you choose your products, how you inform yourself about your style, what other options you want to consider when it comes to your natural hair. So before we jump in, quick reminders, if you haven't already, catch up on the latest episodes of season 3. We've had some great guests on talking about how our gut health and our scalp health are connected, talking about healthy root stalls and how we can learn to play to explore our hair, talking about navigating their natural hair journeys in corporate with locks. How do we care for our hair with color? How do we navigate the braiding industry? All of the things. Plus, we announced our new website and merch launch. If you're not on our newsletter list, check the link in our episode description below. But we have our new merch launch, Redefining Good Hair. So redefining the definition of good hair to be what grows from my head, to be what grows from your head. And like we say at the end of every episode, all hair is good hair. So check out the merch with our t-shirts, our mugs, our tote bag, so that way you can join the movement to embrace the new definition of good hair and spread the word wherever you go, that it's simply what is on our heads. So with those things being said, all the amazing things happening at Your Hair Made Simple and all the things that are coming, let's get into this topic. Now, I have notes today because your hair is a serious matter, right? And so I hope that you're taking some notes too. You know, I like to end the seasons with some time for you to reflect, you to learn, you to prepare yourself better for your natural hair journey. So without further ado, we're just going to jump into these 7 key traits. They're key, but I think they're honestly really simple once you start to understand your hair and how all these traits connect together to really master your natural hair journey. So the first one is texture, right? We hear the term texture all the time, my hair texture. But what does texture actually mean? Hair texture is about the actual strands of your hair. So if you pull your hair apart and you just take one strand, hair texture is looking at how thick that strand of hair is, right? So we hear people talking about thick hair all the time, but like texture is actually about your individual strand of hair, if it is fine, medium, or coarse. And so fine hair, if you hold it up and it's like super thin, almost barely visible, right? Like that would be very, very fine hair. On the opposite end is coarse hair, where if you were to hold it up, it looks very thick, very sturdy. Almost some people like to say if you were to compare it to like strand that you would use to like sew with, something that is like that level of thickness of visibility, right? And maybe not necessarily yarn, right? But like one of the pieces, because it's made up of many pieces, one of the pieces that you would pull out of that. But being able to see it very thick, clearly, and visibly, especially if you're holding it up against a neutral background. And then medium, you fall kind of in between that. Your hair is visible. The strands are not super thick, but they're not really quite thin either. And so thinking about this texture, right? This informs how you can hold a style or maintain your hair, right? If your hair is very, very fine and the strands are very, very thin, right? Doing heavier styles might not be the best thing for you if it's going to pull and weigh on your already fine hair strand versus coarser hair can just hold things with a better grip, with a better intensity, right? So coupled with texture, we also have your hair density. And this is where that thick term comes into play, right? So hair density is when we think about how much hair we actually have on our head. So if I'm looking at my head right now, if I'm looking at my scalp, and let's say like you can very clearly visibly see like spacing in between your scalp, in between like the different strands of hair that's they're placed on your head, that might be considered low density. So low density is essentially you don't have too many individual strands of hair on your head. They're spaced out in between. High density would be that you have, that's when we like to think of like thick hair. So you have a lot of individual strands of hair on your head, pretty much covers the whole of your scalp, really just very densely, for lack of a better word, covered in hair strands. And then you have medium there that falls kind of middle of the road, right? Like you don't necessarily see your scalp. It has a good covering, but you know, you're not as dense or as thick as high density hair. So when we think about those two things coupled together, right? Let's say that you have fine, low density hair. Your hair is thin and there's not a lot of it covering. your head, right? Then we definitely don't want to do things that would be applying tension, because that could, it could restrain the scalp, or it could cause tension on the scalp in ways that might not be the same impact for somebody who has coarse hair strands and like a medium or even high density, right? And so those are our texture and density, are 1 and 2 for the key traits that we have. The next trait that we're going to talk about is your curl shape, right? And so we hear people talking about curl types and all these things all the time, but like, let's just level set on curl shape. So we know that hair can be straight, it can be wavy, it can be curly, it can like spiral curls, or it can be coily, right? With the S and Z shape that our hair strands tend to take, right? And so when we think about the shape of our hair strands, this really just informs the expectations that we can level set with ourselves, knowing, do we have wavy hair? Do we have curly hair? Do we have coily hair? A lot of people spend time waiting for their hair to come out with curly, like spirals or ringlets or certain things, or even just get tighter, when the reality is that after being natural for a long period of time, you may just have wavy hair. Your hair might be wavy. I have some areas of my hair on the top of my head that are a bit wavier, and then other areas on the underside of my head that, that hair is shrinking up. It has the tight S and Z kind of coil pattern to it. And so you can also have different types of shapes on your head. You can have some areas that are wavy. You can have some that are curly. And so knowing this and knowing this about your hair can really, 1, level set your expectations, especially when you're watching tutorials, you're watching styles, you're seeing people do twist outs or braid outs and things, and they're coming out in a certain way, and yours takes a different shape because of the difference in, 1, just the nature of your strands and the shape that they take, right? And so it helps you to level set. And also, 2, if you know that some areas are wavy and some areas are coily, finding styles that can be a little bit more complementary. For me, I wear stretched out styles because I have the underside of my hair that shrinks up and it's more coily, and then the top of my head, it's a little bit more wavy in the back. And so it just helps me to keep an even style. And that's something that I like for myself. So twist outs, 2-strand twists, braid outs, those are the spaces in which I live, right? Some people love wash and goes, right? And so it just really depends on understanding the type of curl or coil or wave that you have to better inform what your hair is going to look like, and being okay with knowing the difference. So sitting and understanding and observing that shape for yourself. So that is number 3. And then number 4, we're jumping into elasticity, right? And so when we talk about the elasticity of our hair, this is really how strong and flexible the strands of our hair are, right? And so if we think about elasticity, essentially it's when you have a healthy piece of hair that has been hydrated and moisturized, let's say like right after you washed your hair, and you pull on your piece of hair, this is just, does it revert back to its shape or not, right? This tells you the strength of your strands and the strength of your shaft and how prone your hair is or is not to breakage. Let's say you just pull on a piece of hair and it springs right back into place. Your hair is highly elastic, right? And so that means that it's strong. It is able to endure like that tension and that pulling. On the other end, low elasticity is when we see that it pulls and it doesn't revert back to shape. It might be more prone to breakage, like since it's not fully reverting to its shape. And then medium kind of middle of the road there is when your hair reverts some of the way, but not often. We can see some breakage happening there, depending on the tension that it's experiencing. When we think about elasticity, it determines also just more of our styling. Like if our hair is not very prone to reverting after being stretched, like what type of tension are we applying to it? What type of styles are we going to do? How often are we going to be manipulating our hair, right? Sometimes, depending on the type of hair that we have, the elasticity can be a sign that we need to either moisturize or apply some type of treatment, which I will talk about with our next trait on if we need to be moisturizing or considering certain treatments. But elasticity is looking at the strength and durability of your individual hair strands. Then we have number 5, which is one of the ones that was the game changer for me. It's the first one that I learned, which is your hair porosity. And so porosity is essentially how your hair absorbs and takes in water, right? Like how does it get moisturized? So on one end, we have low porosity hair. And so this essentially means that it is very hard for moisture, for water, for those things to penetrate your hair shaft. On the opposite end, we have high porosity hair, which means that our hair absorbs the moisture very quickly, but then it goes out just as quickly, right? And then in the middle, we have our medium porosity. Our hair shafts are open enough to let moisture flow in and retain it, but they also, do not dry up at a super quick pace. And so they're like a nice kind of middle of the road. When we think about porosity, almost imagine like if you're looking at like, let's say a straw, right? Or some type of vertical piece, like a pencil, maybe even. And there's holes, right? Like all in this straw. So high porosity hair is essentially like there's all these holes in this straw. So the moisture is going in, it gets in through all these different spaces, right? Because your hair shaft is pretty much wide open, but it goes out just as quickly. So it dries faster, even though it absorbs very quickly. And so with that, hair is made out of protein, right? And so considering things that are protein treatments, things that can help to seal up those holes, right, is going to be helpful for those with high porosity hair, which can be naturally occurring, but it can also occur from damage to your hair. So considering where you fall in why your hair is high porosity. And of course, you can also consult a stylist for treatments that may be helpful as well. But considering that you may need more protein if you're navigating that to help you make sure that your hair is sealing everything and holding everything in. On the opposite end, low porosity hair, everything is sealed up really tight. So the way that the holes are wide open, everything can kind of flow easily with high porosity hair. Low porosity hair is like if you had some tight doors shut on those holes, right, on the straw that you can't, that it takes a little bit more work to get open. And so moisture and hydration penetration are the main things to focus on with low porosity hair. So making sure that hot water or warm water, even when you're applying certain products, can help with opening the shafts up to make sure that it's absorbing everything, not necessarily leaning on as much protein as frequently, right? Because protein is kind of like going to add to the shaft and like build and close it up when you want to open it up enough to let your products seep in. But being mindful of how your products are mixing together, how you're allowing them to penetrate your shafts is going to be really important for low porosity hair. And really you can just observe that by how quickly does your hair absorb moisture in the shower? How quickly does it get wet? Some people like to do the strand test when you take a clean strand and you like put it on water and see if it sinks or floats. And if it floats, then like it absorbed everything. If it floats, then your hair is supposed to be low porosity because the water didn't necessarily penetrate. And if it sinks quickly, then it's high porosity because everything absorbed very fast. And if it floats kind of middle, then that's an indicator that you have medium porosity hair. So different ways that you can determine what your porosity is, but understanding that really also helps with understanding how to layer your products, right? Like you wouldn't necessarily want to like put a sealing agent on top of your products if you're planning on layering something else that you want to moisturize if your hair is low porosity, right? Like you want to get all the moisturizing things in there and then seal it up. Because once you put a seal on it, like an oil or something like that, it's typically hard for it to penetrate again until you open the shafts back up. So things to consider with your porosity for your hair. So the final two that we have, shrinkage, right? And so we talk about shrinkage all the time. We see shrinkage in our hair journeys. It's a part of our natural hair journeys, right? And some people get more shrinkage than others, right? But essentially shrinkage is really the tightness of your curls. And so some people have tighter curls than others. When you wash your hair and you see it immediately revert and shrink up, like it's not an indicator of how long your hair is, right? Some people have really long hair and it shrinks up a lot. Then your hair is like highly prone to shrinkage versus if you have just looser curls, like they're not necessarily as tight, so they don't shrink as much. And that's very easy to observe. I think a lot of people know like if their hair shrinks a lot or does not, really just by observing it when you wash it and you get it wet, right? So on one end, if your hair is not shrinking at all, if you wash it and it's drying and it's really just staying relatively straight, right? Like you're pretty low on the shrinkage end. With curly and coily hair especially, we see that there can be varying ranges of shrinkage that people can experience. And so knowing the amount of shrinkage that you have and also knowing that certain types of your hair or certain areas of your scalp can experience more shrinkage than others. Again, I mentioned like the underside back of my hair shrinks up more than the top of my head does. Understanding one and how to apply products right, because especially with the curl shapes and the S and Z coil shapes, making sure that you're kind of like working the product onto the hair shafts. One, because the shape of the shafts naturally requires a little bit more to work the products in. But two, just understanding shrinkage again with understanding expectations of styling and how certain styles will come out. And if you want more stretch styles or maybe need to lean into, doing your hair on super damp looks, if you want it to be more shrunken, if you want to do it on semi-damp or like semi-dry hair, depending on the stretch and length that you want to get. So it really kind of helps you to just understand and level set and manage how you're going to choose to style your hair and also have realistic expectations when it comes to seeing yourself and seeing styles and knowing one, how your hair reacts to moisture, how it reacts to humidity and the maintenance that it's going to require when you're going into certain areas, knowing that your hair, when it interacts with moisture, can revert quickly or interact with moisture in a way that would cause it to shrink very quickly. And then the last piece that we have is your scalp, right? And so our hair grows from our scalp. It is the basis from which our hair is growing. And so understanding whether we have an oily, a regular, or a dry scalp is going to be very important in making sure that we are curating a healthy environment from which our hair can grow, right? And so understanding if your hair is oily after 2 to 3 days of washing, if you're seeing it to feel greasy, if you're seeing it starting to feel oily, if you're just feeling that kind of like build up, for lack of a better word, then you're probably leaning towards the oily scalp type, right? If on the other hand, you've washed it 2 to 3 days later and your scalp is flaking up, you're feeling it kind of being just dry already, you may be experiencing dry scalp, right? And then balanced scalp. And then a balanced scalp is pretty much middle of the road, right? Very even kill, doesn't lean too dry, holds moisture well after that 2 to 3 day marker period, right? And so as you're understanding your scalp, really just understanding how to better care for it, right? That can inform the type of shampoos you use, right? If you're experiencing a lot of buildup and things, maybe a clarifying shampoo would be more helpful for you. Whereas if your scalp is already kind of naturally dry, clarifying shampoos and things like that, they can tend to be a little bit more stripping and drying because they're trying to like cleanse out all the excess oil. And so a moisturizing shampoo might be something that's more helpful for you to consider, right? Understanding the frequency of washing that you might need to be doing for your hair based on ensuring that you have a healthy and clean scalp environment. Those are things that are going to be really important to making sure that your hair has somewhere consistent and safe and healthy to grow from. So remembering that the scalp is the place from which all of our hair grows and ensuring that we have that set to make sure that all of our hair as it grows out is growing in a healthy and positive environment. So let's recap. I just went through our 7 key traits, 1 being texture, so how thick or thin the actual shaft of your hair is. 2 being density, so how many strands of hair do you have on your head? Then we talked about our curl shape, right? So if we have wavy, curly, coily, straight hair, what that looks like, those different S curls, the spirals, the Z coils, whatever we have, understanding where our hair falls. And if we have multiple different shapes on our head, understanding that, right? Then we talked about elasticity and shrinkage. So the strength of our hair strands, as well as how much they shrink up, informing how we can see ourselves in different styles, informing the styles that we may choose to take on, how much tension we might choose to apply to our hair, and then also our porosity and our scalp moisture. So really just understanding how we're hydrating and caring for our hair, caring for our scalp environment. Those are the 7 key traits that you can start to observe about your hair now to tackle your natural hair journey for the spring, whether you're restarting, refreshing, resetting, wanting to try a new style and figuring out how it works for you, or if you have a loved one in your life who you want to help them better navigate their natural hair journey. Starting out understanding these 7 traits for your hair is really just going to help you to feel more confident in selecting and making decisions based on knowing whether your hair is susceptible to breakage or not, whether you have a propensity to be able to take more attention or not, whether you need to be focused on more moisture or more protein in your products, right? Whether you have a sensitive scalp and it dries often, so you need to make sure that you're moisturizing it. But understanding those things are going to be the 7 key traits that are going to be helpful to inform and build out your hair routine as you select your shampoos, your conditioners, as you decide if you want to be a wash and go queen or king, or if you want to do protective styles or twist outs, or even if you want to get braids, twist, whatever those things are. But knowing how often and how frequently you'll need to wash your hair, care for your hair, restyle your hair based on understanding these principles. So that being said, spring is upon us and you now have your marching orders. So we have about a month to start observing our hair, to start observing for these different traits and really better understanding and building out your plans accordingly. So I look forward to hearing update. You can share with Your Hair Made Simple social media on Instagram and TikTok at Your Hair Made Simple. If you start or restart your natural hair journey this spring or even now and make some new discoveries, definitely tag us, email, join the newsletter. Let me know. I would love to hear. So until next time, join the newsletter to stay up to date with all the good things happening at Your Hair Made Simple. We had a lot of launches, a lot of updates this year already, and we're only in February in Black History Month. We launched our website and we launched our new merch, so you can grab yours and join the movement to redefine good hair with us. And we have more to come because we're just getting started this year. So stay tuned and stay connected for upcoming updates. And remember, until next time, that all hair is good hair and your hair is good hair. Alrighty. Bye, y'all.